welcome to the Young Turks. Got a wild and exciting show for you guys as usual today. Lots of different news, some international as well. If you don't know how much of a sham the Russian elections are, wait till you hear the reality a little bit later in this program. We got some updates for you guys. Russia's not a democracy. Those elections are totally fake. Fake elections. We'll explain a little bit later why that's the case. We have some good news in the show, one that involves Roy Moore as he tries on another nutty conspiracy theory as to why he lost. That's a little bit later with Anna. And then, yes, today is the day that we do Turk of the Year and Jerk of the Year, which always stresses me out because it's a long list and we have to compile it and we have to Okay, anyways, we did it. So that's coming up a little bit later. I know you're on the edge of your seat, mainly to see who's gonna be Jerk of the Year. Don't worry, it's coming. Okay, let's go over here and let's start the show. Okay, a little bit of good news here. It's wrapped in bad news. The bad news, of course, is the opioid epidemic that's going on across the country. Record number of people dying, and it's just been devastating. So one of the places that have been devastated is Cook County in Illinois. The good news is that they've decided to fight back, which is great. So let me read from HuffPost on what's going on here. Cook County, Illinois, which includes Chicago, the nation's third largest city, reported a 70% increase in opioid-related deaths between 2015 and 2016, according to the medical examiner's office. In the city of Chicago, 741 people died from opioid-related overdoses in 2016, similar to the number of people who died from gun violence that year. So, you hear people on television constantly talking about the violence in Chicago. Those are usually white right-wingers who then will add the next sentence, well, what about the culture? Well, what about the culture of the entirety of America that has got all of us hooked on opioids, or far, far too many of us? And so one of the ways that you fight back against that issue is through education and through legal means. And so that's what Chicago's decided to pursue, because those are huge numbers. A 70% increase in 1 year alone is unreal. So here is Tom Preckwinkle, or Preckwinkle, I should say. He says, we believe a good start is to, and he's of course the Cook County's Board of Commissioners president. He says, we believe a good start is to aggressively confront one of the root causes of this national epidemic, the pharmaceutical companies and those paid by the pharmaceutical companies who put profits before public health and safety. Now remember, this is the strategy that they used against big tobacco, and it was remarkably successful. One, it got a ton of money to do education programs, which led to less people smoking, less people getting cancer, and saving untold number of lives, certainly hundreds of thousands, but arguably millions of lives. So in this case, if this industry is being irresponsible, legal means are a perfectly good way to get them under control, and that's obviously what Cook County is now considering doing. So Marina Feng, reporting at Huffington Post, continues on this. The officials want the companies to pay monetary damages for costs incurred by the county's hospitals and jail for treating the opioid crisis. The goal is to hold accountable those who have been complicit in the creation of this epidemic, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox said in a statement. Makes sense to me. We're all bearing the costs. As usual with the drug companies, as with a lot of companies, they have privatized the gains and socialized the losses. The losses are borne not only by our families, but by taxpayer dollars going to treat folks in an epidemic that was clearly created by the drug company, and according to internal documents that have been reported previously, both elsewhere and here, show that they actually did know the scale of addiction that it would create. Okay, the lawsuit cites the company's coordinated and sophisticated and highly deceptive marketing of prescription painkillers like OxyContin and Percocet, which public health officials have named as a major cause of the opioid crisis. So they're going right after the people who created it in the first place. Obviously, we'll have to see how the lawsuit plays out. We don't know yet. You won't know until they've gotten due process and you've gone through the whole system, and then we have a decision. But that decision could be problematic for those drug companies, but it could be great for the American people and the people of Cook County if it leads to a situation where people are more aware of the dangers and we get healthier overall as a country. And they're not the only ones doing it. In September, 41 state attorneys general filed subpoenas demanding information from several major drug manufacturers as part of an investigation into what role the companies may have played in worsening the crisis. So from time to time, you will hear Republicans say, oh, tort reform, don't let them sue anyone. Well, that's an effort to protect corporations at everyone else's expense. Part of how we get things back in line and in balance with what the American public actually wants is through the legal system. And it's worked before with big tobacco and the lawyers that won those cases for the municipalities, the localities, and the states that sued big tobacco did a world of good for the country, and it could happen here again. Okay, now let's go to more hardcore politics. Matt Gaetz is one of Donald Trump's biggest supporters, and by that I don't mean policy-wise. Most of the Republicans support him fervently on almost all of his policies. So when sometimes the press tries to make a distinction between Trump and the Republicans, when it comes to policy, there's almost none. Bob Corker, who spoke out so forcefully against Trump, Jeff Flake, same, McCain, same, all voted for the giant tax cuts for the rich, which was Donald Trump's #1 priority. No, in this case, Matt Gaetz wants to make sure that Donald Trump personally is protected from any legal liability, the special counsel coming after him. He wants to make sure that the president is above the rule of law, and he'll do almost anything to make sure that that gets him to that conclusion, including firing the special counsel and doing a purge of the FBI. These are the guys who claim to be for rule of law, claim to be for Blue Lives Matter and for cops and federal law enforcement. Turns out they are no such thing. Instead, they're actively trying to purge their political opponents, what they perceive to be their political opponents, including in places like the FBI. So Matt Gaetz, congressman from Florida, is on television. Let's hear.
Ambassador Rooney has worked overseas on behalf of the United States of America, knows full well the good work that far too many, or a great deal of folks are doing at the FBI and Department of Justice. The problem is in the swamp of Washington, D.C., the biggest alligator is a politicized FBI and Department of Justice.
But do you agree with them? You're upset about the FBI and what's going on, but should there be a purge?
Well, the purge is happening. We just saw Andrew McCabe announce his retirement recently. You saw Bruce Orr, who was at the Department of Justice, demoted, and you saw Peter Strzok, the person who sent these horrible anti-Trump text messages, the same Peter Strzok who was very involved in the exoneration statement for Hillary Clinton and then got drafted into the Mueller probe. He's also been demoted and reassigned. And so time and again, you see the senior leadership at these agencies exposed for their bias, and that shouldn't in any way impair the good work that folks on the ground are doing each and every day to protect the country.
You're not supposed to do purges of our law enforcement, especially not for political purposes. And here he mentioned that they had political bias. So you're going to fire, you're going to investigate the political leanings of each of the FBI agents and fire anyone who isn't a Republican? I mean, this guy's cheering on the purge. Could you imagine if when Obama got into office, he said we need to investigate the political bias of the FBI and started firing all the Republicans, started firing all the people at the FBI who might have voted against Obama, which according to insiders is about 2/3 of the FBI. That would have been outrageous. And here they are on national TV proudly talking about the purge has begun. Yes, let's go get them. But it actually gets worse because it's one thing no, they're all terrible. To purge out people you don't like based on politics from the FBI is disastrous, but then to end the special counsel would be even worse because he's in the middle of an investigation to see if Trump or anyone associated with him broke the law. What does Matt Gaetz have to say about that?
I mean, if Bob Mueller were any more biased, we'd have to give him credentials for the mainstream media.
So are you calling for Robert Mueller to be fired when you say he's biased?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been calling for Mueller to be fired for months now.
Yeah, absolutely. Who cares about the rule of law? Come on, let's just get rid of it. Let's just call Trump dictator already and be done with it. Purge all of our political opponents. Yeah, Mueller. Yeah, let's fire him. Try to actually enforce the law. What's the matter with that? Mueller has already gotten indictments against people. He's gotten plea deals from people. Those people are going to prison. He's like, yeah, stop all that enforcing the law crap. No. Somebody hand me a brown shirt. I got to get on Fox News and talk about how we fire all of our political opponents. And by the way, I keep saying that because they keep saying it. They keep looking for so-called political bias. But Mueller is not a political opponent of Donald Trump or the Republicans. Mueller is a Republican. He served under George W. Bush. He's a registered Republican. Other Republicans before the madness set in respected Mueller completely. Most of the Senate Republicans still do. There is no charge of political bias against Mueller. If there was, it'd be him being biased against Democrats. He has voted Republican his whole life. And I guess under Matt Gaetz's rules, he would have been purged by the Democrats when they got into office. This is not anywhere near democracy. But believe it or not, it's going to get slightly worse. Listen to the last part here.
He needs to step up, be the Attorney General, fire Mueller, and appoint a second special counsel to evaluate the Clinton Foundation.
Oh, okay. Not only are we stopping an investigation in the middle because we're worried that they actually do have the goods. That's why they've arrested these people. That's why some of them have confessed already and pled guilty. So stop it. Don't find actual illegalities and wrongdoing. Instead, let's go. It's not that I mind special counsels. I just want it to be political. I don't care about the law is what Matt Gaetz is screaming from the rooftops in that Fox News appearance. So he's saying, instead, I want to go after our old political opponents like Hillary Clinton. Let's, based on what? I don't know, it doesn't matter. Whatever we've been screaming lately. Is she in office? Is she in power? What's going on? No, I don't care. Let's just do a political witch hunt. They always do projection. When Trump says witch hunt is against him, he means let's start a witch hunt against my political opponents. So now Gaetz says, and this is a sitting United States congressman, saying, hey, let's start a political investigation of Hillary Clinton and see if we could put her in prison. Now that's their former opponent. You think they won't do it to their next opponent? So let's say that somebody's gonna run against Donald Trump. Once you've politicized the FBI and once you've purged everyone who didn't agree with you at the organization and fired anyone who was investigating you, what would stop you from investigating your future political opponents or your current ones? Nothing at all would stop you, because once we've agreed to the lawlessness, there's no more brakes in that system. And that car drives straight into fascism. And Matt Gaetz celebrates it all along, because they don't believe in democracy. They are authoritarian by nature. Matt Gaetz can't wait for fascism to arrive in America. He'll be in the front seat. Okay, I think I was clear enough on that. So let's go to Jenna Fisher. Fascist wannabes. Okay. So Jenna Fisher, of course, a well-known actress, played in The Office for a number of years. And she tweeted right after the tax bill passed about a provision in there that was really troubling. She said, I can't stop thinking about how school teachers can no longer deduct the cost of their classroom supplies on their taxes. Now, that is slightly incorrect. So why is that? That provision was in the House version of the bill. They said, you can get a deduction up to $250 if out of pocket you're buying school supplies for the kids that you teach. The school should be buying those supplies, but the teachers, out of the goodness of their heart, would buy supplies sometimes, and they get to deduct off a tiny amount. And in the original House version too, there was still a deduction for private jets, which survived to the final bill. So in the beginning, they're like, let's punish the school teachers trying to help their kids, but let's make sure that people with private jets get richer, okay? Now, they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, the Republicans did, and so when there was a huge uproar over that, they're like, fine, we'll take it out. So it was not in the final bill, so that's why Jenna Fisher was wrong in complaining about that after the bill had passed, because that version of the bill didn't have it, okay? But it was people like her who had brought up that issue in the first place, and that got them to withdraw it. If there was no spotlight on it, they would have just kept it in, okay? So people jumped all over, and I say people, but it's all the right-wing trolls online who take tiny little issues. No, that was in the House bill. We wanted to do it. We wanted to crush the teachers and break their backs, but we got caught publicly, so we took it out. Oh, you're wrong, and they could make a huge big stink until she has to issue a gigantic apology. So She says, I did not mean to spread misinformation. I was well-intentioned, but I was behind on my research, which is understandable because she's not involved in politics. She's just an American who cares. And when she saw that provision in there, which was in the House bill, she was justifiably outraged. Okay, but by the way, should she correct it? Of course she should. But that's the uneven playing field because progressives are good people who don't want to do fake news, who don't want to misinform you. They care about the facts. That's why people like Jenna Fisher apologize, right? But the other side doesn't give a damn. I'll get to them in a second. But she goes on. She said, last month, the House of Representatives voted for a tax bill that did kill a $250 deduction for teachers to buy classroom supplies, but in the final bill, the deduction was restored. I feel genuinely bad about getting my facts wrong, and I'm sorry. Okay, it's a wonderful, probably far too much apology. In fact, I know it's too much, but I'm glad she corrected it. Everybody who's rational is glad she corrected it. And another statement on Twitter, she says, I've deleted a tweet and would like to issue an apology. Please read and retweet to help me spread the word. Thanks. You don't need to keep retweeting. Anyway, so here's the longer version of that. I mean, it is just apology on top of apology. And okay, so if the playing field was even, I'd say, okay, great, wonderful, we corrected something. I mean, you don't have to go that over the top for a tiny, tiny, minuscule, microscopic mistake, but God bless your heart for being a good person and doing that. But the playing field is not even. Republicans lie about the heart of the bill all the time. They do it regularly, that's their course of business. Has Donald Trump ever issued an apology for all the things that he lied about, actively lied about in the bill? So, I mean, this again goes to the core of the bill, but I can give you 1,000 examples like this. He said at one point, the rich will not be gaining at all with this plan. We are looking for the middle class and we're looking for jobs, jobs being the economy. The rich will not be gaining at all, he said, at all with this plan. It is a monstrous lie. In fact, he laughed about it afterwards. As CBS News reported, President Trump kicked off his holiday weekend at Mar-a-Lago Friday night at a dinner where he told friends, you all just got a lot richer, referencing the sweeping tax overhaul he signed into law hours earlier. All those people had to pay at least a $200,000 initiation fee. They were all already fabulously rich, and now they're laughing at you that they just got way richer. In fact, I'll put exact numbers on it. According to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, 82.8% of the bill's benefits would go to the top 1% of Americans. So 83% of the money goes to the richest people in the country. Has Donald Trump ever apologized? Has he ever deleted a tweet? Has he ever done gigantic long apologies for getting things wrong? She got a tiny $250 deduction wrong, and only based on the timing. It wasn't an earlier version. Giant apology. The other side, oh yeah, the rich won't gain a penny. Just kidding, they're getting trillions of dollars, but will never apologize, will never correct it. And what disgusts me is that in the media, and look, I know that these days they're much better in keeping Trump accountable. Overall though, it's always 50-50. I can't quite tell. Ooh, Jenna Fisher made a big mistake. Let's all talk about how Jenna Fisher made a mistake. How about not just Trump, every Republican senator, every Republican congressman, every Republican pundit who lied about this bill and said the rich would not get richer? How about Donald Trump during the campaign saying that he was going to take away a loophole from the hedge fund guys? He didn't. He kept it in. Another, not a tiny little mistake, a purposeful, gigantic lie, lie after lie after lie. And there's never any apologies, there's never any corrections, because in this country, we are not having a debate about policy differences. We're having a debate about different realities. One side tries to keep to the facts and is religious about it and is vigilant in policing tiny little errors. The other side does not give a damn about reality. All they care about is how do I lie, how do I do propaganda and force it down people's throats and never ever fix it. We should be past the time of trying to call these things even. They are not even. So if you're going to criticize Jenna Fisher, you should do it 1,000 times more, 1,000,000 times more to Donald Trump and every single Republican that voted for that monstrous tax bill. Young Turks.
T-minus 1 minute till landing.
TYT broadcast controllers, listen up. Give me a go, no go for landing. Sound?
Audio is hovering at minus 12 decibels. We're go.
Streaming?
We're go.
Camera crew?
We're a go.
Mission control?
We're go.
Snacks?
We're good.
Iguana?
Sir, we are go for landing.
Okay, everybody. I want this to go off without a hitch.
Sir, I've been looking over this joke for the past hour, and with the Bannon firing now weeks old and waiting interest.
English, Johnson, English. What are you trying to tell me?
This joke isn't going to land, sir.
Okay, everyone. Forget the old plan. From this moment on, we're improvising a new joke.
So this is where the show started, and this is where it was supposed to end. Now the joke was supposed to land here, but that's not gonna happen, obviously. So we need to come up with a new joke. Maybe here?
Hits are dropping, streams are failing, retweets are stopping.
40 seconds.
All right, team. We gotta find a way to make this fit into a joke about this that will appeal to them.
30 seconds.
The Trump joke's our safest option.
Trying to land a Trump joke after this week's events is a suicide mission.
We are officially out of time. We need to act now.
Sir, I think our best course of action is to let Jink try to land a dad joke.
That's the deal?
That's the deal.
All right, everyone, to their stations.
Germany, and some of the competitor nations like Netherlands and Finland.
Cameras, position, social media team. Brace front follows.
10 seconds.
As for the rest of us, all any of us can do now is wait and hope.
This is gonna be the worst disaster TYT has ever experienced.
With all due respect, sir, I think this will be the finest hour 2 yet.
Angela Merkel's government seems to have signaled pronounced.
Come on, Jink.
Everyone, it's been a pleasure streaming with you.
Greek Prime Minister immediately picked up the phone to Putin and said, "You Putin any money in?" Okay, anyway.
TYT crew, the joke has landed.
Back on the Young Turks, a couple of quick tweets for you guys, then Turk and Jerk of the Year. I Am Sock says, the word purge is like moist. It always gets uncomfortable when you hear it. Agreed. Kelly Kerr says, just joined yesterday so I could chat with you guys. Had to ask my daughter how to tweet. I'm a big fan. Kelly, you nailed it. You tweeted and it got to me and I read it. Mission accomplished. And thank you to Kelly's daughter for helping her with that. If you guys would like to join and become members, perfect time to do it because we still have the gift program going on for a couple more days. tytnetwork.com/gift, and you can get it for yourself, but you could also give it to other people so they could check it out. Just $25, 3 months of membership. You'll get all the shows, old school, aggressive, progressives, post games, and get all the shows ad free, of course. And by the way, one more thing on that. Right now, we still have one last sale for the year at shoptyt.com, and that is on the Resist collection. It's all the way up to 25% off. For some reason, you have to type in the code treat yourself. So that's the one of the things that are really popular in that is the Resist with other historical figures like FDR and Rosa Parks. So check that out at shoptyt.com. All right, let's go to Turks and Jerks of the year. Over here. Thank you. All right, no, let's start with Jerk of the Year. Right? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Well, we get to announce the Jerk of the Year now. That's what we do every year at the end of the year. And boy, there's a lot of people in this category and a lot to choose from. We had to boil it down to 5 people as we usually do. The 4 runner-ups and the winner. So all the runner-ups were very worthy. They easily could have been Jerk of the Year, starting with Roy Moore. Now, do I have to explain why he was a candidate for Jerk of the Year? Okay, fine. The allegations of sexual assault on a 16-year-old, getting a 14-year-old nearly naked and having her apparently touch his genitals back in the day. All this came up. He wouldn't withdraw. He kept going. He's still going. All the Republicans in Alabama have said that he has lost and they have certified the election. And he thinks that it is a Muslim/Marxist takeover of Alabama. I mean, the guy is an absolute lunatic. But even if it wasn't for the allegations of him being a child predator, you still had him saying that George Soros was going to hell because he's not in the right faith, and that he apparently had some sort of political/sexual conspiracy. The guy's a full-blown lunatic. Doesn't believe in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that set the slaves free. Couldn't get any worse. But nonetheless, he was beaten by another guy who eventually won the Jerk of the Year. So let's keep going. The next runner-up is equally worthy of the title. Harvey Weinstein thought long and hard about making him the Jerk of the Year. It has led to the Me Too movement, which has liberated a lot of people, not exclusively because of that, but unfortunately, some of the worst allegations of any of the people involved in sexual harassment and sexual assault cases, ranging all the way up to literally barging into women's hotel rooms, apartments, and houses and just raping them. And dozens of women have come forward. It's still unclear to me why he has not been arrested for any of those crimes. But every piece of those allegations was more monstrous than the next. Easily could have won in any year. Another Jerk of the Year candidate is Steve Bannon. That is not only for being chief strategist to Donald Trump for a good number of months, at least within the White House, running Breitbart now. So that's policy differences, and that's okay. But mainly for being leader of the alt-right. The alt-right that brought us, among other things this year, that rally in Charlottesville, which turned out so disastrous, that has spread fear and hatred throughout the country and pushed the president to go more in that hard right-wing, hateful direction, including saying that there are very fine people on both sides after Charlottesville. The encouragement apparently of the alt-right, Donald Trump said that. So Steve Bannon being the head of the alt-right in a sense, and he declared Breitbart the place for the alt-right a while back, certainly is a good candidate for Jerk of the Year. And then also on the list is Vladimir Putin for messing with democracy all across the world. Not only are there credible allegations of collusion in the US elections and seems to be giving orders to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump doesn't listen to anyone but Putin. Can't wait to see how that turns out, and maybe Putin can win next year for Jerk of the Year, depending on the information that we have. But much more importantly, in terms of his immediate effect, is the ruining of Russian democracy. So he has, let's put it this way, political opponents have magically wound up dead or very clearly put in prison, where the European Court of Human Rights says they have no business in prison. You have put them in prison because they dared to oppose you politically. Reporters that wanted to report on things magically wind up dead. Diplomats that might know information about the US election or other things, all dead. So Vladimir Putin, make no mistake, is the dictator of Russia, and most importantly, oppresses his own people. Nonetheless, he was edged out, and so were all these monstrous people, by the winner. Not only among the very few things he has actually won, it is Donald Trump. So look, he's the Michael Jordan of jerks. There's an argument to be made for him winning almost every year, certainly when he's been involved in politics. But I don't want to have all the attention around Roy Moore and Harvey Weinstein, et cetera, and then very, very justified, have us lose track of all the things that Donald Trump has done. Because, preying on women, check. Donald Trump has already done that. That's what got Harvey Weinstein and Roy Moore on the list in a lot of ways. Drumming up racial hatreds that Roy Moore did, check. Donald Trump's got that as well. And you go down the list, working with Vladimir Putin, check. Working with Steve Bannon, check, check, check. So he is the sum of all jerks. I'll go through a quick list, but you can have dozens and dozens of things on this list. He said that the rich would not get any of the tax cuts. 83% of the tax cuts went to the top 1%. He was lying all along, and then laughed about it afterwards at Mar-a-Lago, declaring to his rich friends, "You all just got richer." A scam or artist of the utmost degree. He reinstituted the swamp in Washington, filled his cabinet with cronies, corrupt old friends of his, Goldman Sachs appointees, the financial industry, all the things he said he wouldn't do, he did exactly all of it. And then a healthcare bill so monstrous that it was going to cause 33 million Americans to lose their health insurance. As it stands in the tax cut, they squeezed in killing off the mandate, which might put 13 million Americans with no healthcare insurance anyway, and he brags about it. Then you had the Muslim ban, you had the attacks online against everyone, including constantly accusing women of bleeding from different body parts. This year, he did it to Mika Brzezinski about her so-called facelift, which wasn't a facelift, but it doesn't matter, it goes on. Just go on any given day and look at his Twitter account and see the different people that he's bullying. I mean, he is the definition of a jerk. And then you got calling Puerto Ricans basically lazy after they were hit with a hurricane, instead of trying to support them, saying, oh yeah, they're not working hard to help themselves. And then on top of that, you've got the defense of the neo-Nazis and alt-right at the Charlottesville rally, where he said there was, quote, some very fine people on both sides. I don't know a lot of very fine neo-Nazis, but apparently Donald Trump does. That is one of the many things he did, maybe hundreds of things he did this year, that amply makes him Jerk of the Year, and one of the biggest we've ever had. Okay, so that's the Jerk of the Year. Now we go to positive news and Turk of the Year, all the people who've done good things throughout the year or were brave enough and suffered some of the consequences. Okay, so Turk of the Year, there's 4 people that are runner-ups and then a winner, and we do this every year. So let me give you the different candidates that we considered that we thought were great. The Women's March organizers. It was an amazing march for all the people who showed up. It was fantastic. Particularly the women who organized it were heroic and made a big difference. It could have easily won Turk of the Year. I don't like to give it to groups. I try to make it as specific as possible. Some collection of people won in this case in this year because it was unavoidable. But not to take anything away from any of these people who all did wonderful things this year. Well, the next candidate's a little bit tragic. It's Heather Heyer, and so she was a person who was run over and killed by the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, and the reason to put her on the list is because she had the bravery and the courage to go out there, and knowing that some of the people on the other side were vicious, knowing that they had violent tendencies, and knowing that the neo-Nazis were marching in that town, she stood up. She could have stayed at home. She could have stayed on her couch and watching TV, but no, she wanted to go out there, and she did it peacefully. And again, she is symbolic of all the people who have actually taken some action to protest the fascists in our midst. Unfortunately, she paid the ultimate price for that, and so I just wanted to recognize her courage, and it's well deserved, obviously. So, and our hearts go out to her and her family. Okay, now next on the list is Jimmy Kimmel, and of course these are not in order except for the final winner. And I want to give Jimmy Kimmel a lot of credit, because if you don't know, in the entertainment world, they tell you all the time, don't be political. Whatever you do, don't offend anyone. Just be milquetoast, be safe, be vanilla, be uninteresting. Well, Jimmy Kimmel broke that rule this year, and he went out there and called out Republican senators by name during the healthcare bill. And he said, you're going to get people killed. He was absolutely right. Up to as many as 33 million people were going to lose their insurance. And Jimmy Kimmel being so vocal about it was not the only thing that swung it by any stretch of the imagination. And it wasn't the only thing that made that bill incredibly unpopular, and it was down to 17% in popularity. But it did take courage, and it did make a difference, and it caused so many others to talk about the issues that Kimmel had brought up. He did a wonderful job with it, and he then later called out Roy Moore as well. So in terms of the entertainment world, that's as much profiles and courage as you're going to get, and it was great. So belongs on the list, no doubt about it. And then one more candidate here, and that's Jeremy Corbyn for Turk of the Year. Here's a guy that all of the British punditry elites, intellectuals said, oh, I do declare that socialist has no chance at all. And they counted him out in every conceivable way. They ridiculed him and derided him throughout. And he was at about a 24-point deficit with only a month before to go before the elections, and he nearly won. He closed a gigantic deficit, about 20 points he closed within a month. And you know why? Because he put together a platform that actually represented the people. And the establishment, filled with their corruption in looking out for their friends and people in industry and multinational corporations, are not used to a populist like Jeremy Corbyn giving them a real challenge. But when he had a platform that actually wanted to represent the people in the UK, no matter how little support he had among the elites, he still did a wonderful job of pushing that forward and almost winning. And next time, watch out, because he's not going anywhere. Okay, now finally, the folks who won. Turk of the Year here is a number of women. It's of course all the women that are involved in the Me Too movement. But I want to show you three that we picked in particular. But again, it of course is the entire movement and everyone who was involved. But the three that are named here are Tarana Burke, Alyssa Milano, and Gretchen Carlson. I'll tell you why. So if you're not familiar with Burke, you should be. She actually came up with the idea of the Me Too movement all the way back in 2007. And so you might say, well, that was too early and that's not this movement. No, that's what you do. If you have an idea and you want to protect women, and she wanted to, and she's heard the stories of sexual assault and sexual harassment, and she wanted to fight back, and she started an organization to do that. You never know where those ripples wind up. But she dared to throw that pebble in the pond when it was not popular. And 10 years later, it was picked up and made a worldwide movement that, in my opinion, liberated 50% of the population. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think that this year we saw how many women were suffering sexual harassment at work and had not come forward because of the intimidation, because of the public pressure, because of the power. And now, having come forward, they have created an environment that is much harder to commit those heinous acts of sexual harassment, sexual assault. Still happens, no question about it. Still a long road to go, but they made tremendous progress. So the reason Alyssa Milano is on there, she's one of the first accusers as well in 2017, but started the Me Too movement on Twitter. Later, then gave credit to Burke once she realized that Burke had started it earlier. But Milano's tweet is the one I think reached 12 million people and really launched that movement. But Gretchen Carlson, who is a conservative Fox News anchor, or was, also should be mentioned here and is part of who our Turk of the Year is, because she's the first one that came forward against Roger Ailes. And that was an incredibly difficult thing to do, because Ailes had arguably more power than any conservative in the country. And if you're a conservative like Carlson, it's hard to get a job anywhere else but Fox News. And she had a job there and it paid really well. And she knew that if she came out against Ailes, there would be a world of pain and hate from her own side. And that is what happened in the beginning. But she was brave, she was strong, she fought back. And next thing you know, it started a conversation where other women came forward at Fox News and revealed what Roger Ailes had done, and then eventually Bill O'Reilly. But more important than Fox News was the movement that started, that then had Harvey Weinstein outed and so many others. And so for her role in that movement, I wanted to name her specifically as well. So a terrific collection of wonderful human beings who stood up not just for themselves, but for other women and for decency overall in the country, and made a gigantic difference. So thank you to all of them, and a well-deserved Turk of the Year. All right, we will come back. We've got Anna when we return, and Roy Moore, who is still got conspiracy theories as to why he lost, and they are comical. I'll tell you about it when we come back. back on the Young Turks. Cenk and Anna with you guys. All right, I have a couple tweets for you, Casper. You ready?
Just for me, though.
Just for you. Okay. Okay. Kara Curley writes in, it's really sad and really telling that the nominees for Jerks stand out in my memory stronger than the Turks of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we struggled to think of Turks of the year. We had to think long and hard. Jerks were like a ton. We couldn't make. In fact, the Stu makes a great point. Really surprised Ajit Pai didn't make Jerk of the year.
Oh.
Well, that's a great point. It's a great point. And but there are just too many of them. And unfortunately, 2017 was a great year for Jerks.
Yeah.
And but you know what? Look, the Me Too movement, though, overall, probably culturally, which is the most important thing, had a bigger impact than all the Jerks combined. So
certainly had a bigger impact in changing culture.
That's right,
Yeah.
and in helping to liberate women, change their daily lives, save what, millions of women at some point, is my guess, from sexual harassment and assault, etc. So you can't underestimate that. There's always hope, and even in a dark year like 2017, a great movement came out of it. Okay, Insolent Range writes in, right now we fear them, referring to the right wing, I think mainly referring to the Jenna Fisher story I did, and that's what keeps them on the offense. Time to make them fear us.
Yes, I like that attitude.
All right, well, you know, I was wearing my TYT shirt the other day that said, we're the ones who knock. And that's the whole point of that shirt, which is, they're not coming for us, we're coming for them. By the way, they are coming for us, but that's to be expected. You know why they come for us? Because we fight for you guys, and we're strong, and they want to knock down the strongest people on the other side. Not going to happen. So anyway, we're here for you, and we'll continue to be. All right, Casper, what's next?
All right. The state of Alabama has officially certified Doug Jones as the Senate person who won the Senate race in the state, and Doug Jones is still being challenged by Roy Moore, which is hilarious. The reason why it's hilarious is because Roy Moore believes that he did not lose. He thinks that voter fraud was the reason why Doug Jones won by a fairly small margin, 1.5% of the vote. Now, after late counted provisional and military ballots were added to the total, Doug Jones defeated Republican nominee Roy Moore by 21,924 votes out of more than 1.3 million cast. So that is the final number, okay? And Roy Moore is not happy with that. He doesn't believe that it's true. He thinks that it's all fraud. So he actually filed a lawsuit and urged the state of Alabama to postpone the certification. So he filed this legal complaint alleging election fraud and asked the state to consider holding a new election. Montgomery Circuit Judge Johnny Hardwick denied Moore's request to stop the process. Moore's campaign argued that Alabama would, quote, suffer irreparable harm if the election results are certified without preserving and investigating all the evidence of potential fraud. By the way, his allegations of fraud were investigated and no fraud was found. He's just like Trump. He just cannot handle the fact that he's a loser and didn't win the vote. And when I talk about Trump, I'm talking about the popular vote, obviously.
Okay, so there's a bunch of parts of this story that I love. Number one, in order for you to have context as to who certified the election, I want you to know that it was Alabama Governor Kay Ivey who supported Roy Moore that said, yes, this election results are absolutely clear and real, and Doug Jones has won. Attorney General Steve Marshall, Republican. Secretary of State John Merrill, Republican. They all certified the election. Okay.
I thought that it was illegal immigrants who were in the country that.
And Marxists, don't forget the Marxists, all over Alabama, and the Muslims. But somehow those three really hardcore right-wing Republicans all agreed that it was a legitimate election. And then when you turn to John Merrill, Roy Moore says, fraud. And Merrill's like, well, great, I'm a Republican. I like to pretend there's fraud. So we set up a whole website in Alabama called stopvoterfraudnow.com. So you're supposed to go there and tell us the cases you have of fraud. And in the legal complaint, this is my second favorite part of the story, they're like, there's tremendous voter fraud. And they're like, all right, well, show us one instance. Not going to. But this is a legal complaint. If you're ever going to show evidence, this is when you would show it. You're not talking to a reporter. You can say, oh, well, that's legal, I get to. No, you're suing them, saying there was fraud. So where is it? The only thing that they could point to was a guy on tape who said, oh yeah, a lot of people are coming in to help from out of state. So Merrill, who's a Republican and can't wait to find voter fraud so he can do voter restrictions, right? Goes and investigates, finds the guy, and turns out he lives in Alabama and has every right to vote and didn't commit any fraud at all.
I mean, come on. It's surprising that Trump didn't endorse Roy Moore from the very beginning, because remember, during the primaries, he endorsed Luther Strange, and then he immediately regretted endorsing Luther Strange when Roy Moore won the primary. But the reason why I say it's surprising that Trump didn't endorse him from the very beginning is because he's almost like a carbon copy of Trump. Won't take personal responsibility, even though Republicans claim they're the party of responsibility, personal responsibility, and can't handle the fact that he lost. You lost. In fact, here's another part of the story that I personally really enjoyed. There were people who didn't want a Democrat. They didn't want to vote for a Democrat, but they did cast a protest vote. And the way that they do that is by writing in a candidate, right? Now, according to the official numbers, 22,819 ballots were cast for write-in candidates, okay? And a lot of those people put Luther Strange as that candidate. So just to go back, Moore lost by 21,924 votes, and 22,819 ballots were cast in this protest vote where they wrote people in.
Yep. Now look, even if they hadn't done right, not every vote was for Luther Strange.
Right.
Moore would have lost anyway, but it doesn't matter. Write-ins are 100% part of the process, and sad day for him, which leads to my third favorite point about this story. In his legal complaint, he says, well, these elections results must not be true because I didn't do as well as Republicans normally do in Alabama. Oh, you figured that out, did you, Sherlock? Right? Of course, gee, I wonder why. I wonder why you didn't do as well as other Republicans in Alabama. Because there were allegations of what a monster you are, and you're a lunatic who says things like we should get rid of all of the amendments after the Bill of Rights, including the ones that freed the slaves. And you say George Soros has some sort of sexual political agenda and is going to hell for being Jewish. Gee, I wonder why you didn't get as many Republican votes as people normally get in Alabama. And to cry about it with no evidence is terrible. But my favorite, and that actually leads in perfectly to number 4. So many good parts of Roy Moore's loss and crying, and by the way, it sounds he looks a little triggered. So I hope the snowflake didn't have his feelings hurt. He cited a number of election analysts in his complaint.
Oh, this is so good.
Yeah. So James Conner Jr., one of the election analysts who signed an affidavit on behalf of Moore's campaign, has written and spoken about Zionist control of world politics and alleged an Israeli role in September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks.
Sounds like he'd be a credible expert to chime in on all this.
They put that guy in as a but we have an expert, right? So this guy, I mean, on top of everything else, deeply anti-Semitic, bigoted, racist, the list goes on and on and on. And then he has the nerve to write in his complaint, I don't know why I didn't get as many votes as Republicans normally do.
Oh, so good, so good. All right, moving on to some other news. Another person who has been caught lying for like the billionth time. Donald Trump has been boasting about his legislative wins. And if you've paid any attention to the news at all, you know that he hasn't really signed too many laws or bills into law. Now, recently he was speaking to firefighters in West Palm Beach during his golfing tour. And while he was speaking to them, here's what he had to say about his accomplishments in his first year in office.
Legislation passed. They were saying that if we got this one done, we would have succeeded with legislation. But I believe we have, and you have to ask those folks, but I think they know the real answer. We have more legislation passed, including the record was Harry Truman, a long time ago, and we broke that record. So we have a lot done.
So in case you didn't hear that clearly, We got a lot of legislation passed, I believe, and you would have to ask those folks who will know the real answer. We have more legislation passed, including the record was Harry Truman a long time ago. So he believes he has surpassed Harry Truman's record of legislative wins at this point in his presidency.
And he clearly said at the end there, we broke that record.
Okay, we all know that's a lie. But then when you dig deeper and figure out how little he's accomplished, it's even more amusing, okay? So there is an organization that actually tracks all this stuff, and once they saw that Trump made statements like this, they decided to do just a quick analysis, actually a pretty deep analysis into what he has accomplished, what he hasn't accomplished. It's govtrack.us, you should check it out. So Trump has actually signed fewer bills into law than any other president in his first year in office since Dwight Eisenhower in 1953, and that's according to GovTrack, okay? By his own standard, the president has sunk to the last place with 94 bills signed into law by his 336th day in office. They wrote this on December 21st. That's 8 fewer than George W. Bush, and not even half as many as Presidents Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, okay, and the numbers are right there for you. And then they also included a nifty little graph that you can take a look for yourself, and it shows the accomplishments in the first 336 days, so through December 21st. And you can see that Trump is pretty low on that list.
No, I heard he broke the record. By the way, it turns out in the last 64 years, he did break the record. Record low.
Just stop talking. Stop talking. I mean, he can't, I mean, this is the kind of behavior you see from dictators, right? Dictators, I always think about Kim Jong-un, right? And his bowling record. Yeah. Like how he bowls a perfect game.
Oh, Kim Il-jong, yeah, that was his dad.
That was his dad, okay, yeah, I knew I got that wrong.
Yeah.
And every time I hear Trump lie about his crowd sizes or his accomplishments, I think of that, I think of North Korea, and that's a scary thing to think about.
I bowl 300 each time. That's what he used to say. He said that on a golf course of 18 holes, he would regularly shoot at 27. Okay, and almost, so now Trump doesn't say 27, because that, even for Trump, that's a little too much. But he has very similarly claimed that he has won all these golf championships at his different courses, but there's never any confirmation of it. I mean, he is like those guys. Kim Jong-il or Kim Il-jong or Kim Jong-un, I forget which one, declared that they have no asshole. Okay.
No, but literally. Like they have no anus, no sphincter, no place in which human fecal matter exits the body.
Because they're gods. And Trump also lies about body parts. He says he has big hands. Did you see that video? He has tiny, tiny hands.
Okay. So I want to break this down further because I think it's important to kind of understand what's meant by legislative wins and legislation signed by the president. So in terms of legislative wins, meaning Congress carrying out the president's agenda and then the president being able to sign that into law, there has only been how many? I think it's one, right? And that was the tax overhaul. They managed to, the tax cuts, they managed to do that. But more than 36, when it comes to what Trump has signed, more than 36 modify or extend existing laws, 16 repeal rules and regulations using a process known as the Congressional Review Act, 12 commemorate or honor people and organizations by doing things like renaming federal buildings, and 7 provide temporary government funding or one-time disaster relief funds. So those are the things that he's signed. Those are not legislative wins, okay? He has not accomplished more than any other president in history. He'll have you believe that, but it's not true.
So thank God he hasn't. I mean, I don't want him to pass any of these bills, and the one bill that he did pass was, to be fair, really important, and it's going to be super hard to undo those tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. Corporations will use all of their political might and power and money with all the politicians that they've bought off to make sure we never undo those tax cuts for them. Meanwhile, of course, they'll go to cut our Medicare, Social Security, et cetera, and they'll go to raise our taxes later, but it'll be hard to undo that. So, he didn't have to make up stuff. He could have just said, man, you know what? We got historic tax cuts for my friends at Mar-a-Lago, and that's why I got in office. That was my #1 objective. And by the way, I also got giant tax cuts. It's It's going to give me millions of dollars every single year. This presidency is paying off fantastic for me. That would have been honest and it would have been true. They are historic.
I know, Cenk, but that's what a reasonable, smart person would do, right? But he's not reasonable or smart. He is the definition of daddy issues. Like, he's so incredibly insecure and so obsessed with, impressing people that he has to be the best. He has to be the one that accomplished the most. He's the one who broke the record. No, dude, it's like the easiest thing in the world to just check public data and figure out that you're lying. And by the way, yes, I agree with you, Cenk. We should be happy about the fact that he hasn't accomplished a lot of the things that he's wanted to accomplish, but there are scary things other than the tax cuts that he did accomplish. So let me give you the data that GovTrack also compiled. He also appointed the most appellate judges in any president's first year, though he lags in civilian appointments to top federal agency positions.
But let me explain the context of that because that's important. It's not like he worked really hard at it. No, the Republicans had blocked so many of Obama's judges that there was a giant backlog. And so when Trump came in and Republicans control both houses, they were like, yep, okay. Now instead of progressive justices, we obstructed and obstructed and obstructed. Now we're going to put in all conservative judges. And Trump was nominating people who were just like bloggers who'd never gone to court. And to the point where he got so embarrassing, a Republican senator drew the line and asked like simple legal questions of one of his candidates. They couldn't answer any of them. And finally, a couple of them were turned down. But it was not a big accomplishment of Trump. If you want to give quote unquote credit, you would give it to the Republicans for cheating during the Obama years.
Right.
And that's why he put so many judges in when he got into office.
Right. So that's the truth. That's what's going on.
And one last thing, you know that Trump is about to lie when he says, I think. You'll have to check with people.
No, I know. He's like, you'd have to ask these folks over there that I think are experts, but maybe not really. I don't know. Anyway, I'm the best, everyone. Everyone loves me. I'm the most popular president of all time. I have the highest approval rating. I have the biggest hands. I have a normal skin tone. Like, whatever it is, I don't know.
Okay, but if you're not sure, then don't say it. And you weren't remotely sure. In fact, you made it up completely. So hush already.
Let's take a break. When we come back, more news for you that you will want to hear about.
Go.
Been easy for me. I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All my life, I was told no.
He said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
back on TYT. Joy says Doug Jones may have won by 20,000, but he only won by 20,000. Alabamians were just fine and dandy with electing a racist, sexist, bigoted predator who is known as a pedophile, banned from public places. A win is a win, but for fuck's sake, it's not a positive.
Yeah, there was, I forget which news organization did it, but they went to Alabama and spoke to people who voted for Roy Moore, and like some of the excuses that they were making were terrifying, really terrifying. Just, you know, I think one person said something along the lines of like, yeah, who wouldn't be, what 13-year-old wouldn't be turned on by a judge or something like that. Like basically the teenagers wanted it.
All right, Game Over writes in, spewed coffee laughing at Anna's golfing tour slam, rolling off her tongue with ease. Hasn't this whole year been a golfing tour through, though, when you think about it?
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny you say that because one of the stories in the news today that we didn't get to put in the rundown is Donald Trump saying 3 days ago, all right, back to work. And you know what he's done in the last 3 days? Golfed every single day.
No. He said Merry Christmas, but back to work tomorrow to make America great again. And then his public schedule showed nothing. There was nothing on it.
Yeah, and he's been golfing for 3 days straight. Then they started lining up trucks in front of the golf course so the reporters couldn't take pictures of him golfing. Clown. Anyway, Don writes in, presumably not Trump. The saddest and most disturbing thing is that many people believe the liar in chief.
Yeah.
Yes, lots and lots of people. All right, what's next, Anna?
Okay. Now that the GOP has succeeded in passing major tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the country and corporations, they will move on to welfare reform. One of the reasons why you should expect it is because Senator Paul Ryan.
No, House Speaker Paul Ryan.
Yes, House Speaker Paul Ryan has been incredibly forthcoming about their plans to cut funding for programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Here he is on Fox News making that extremely clear.
Just so you know, Martha, the House has passed all of these bills. The House passed the biggest entitlement reform bill ever passed by a Congress in May, our health care bill. Unfortunately, the Senate fell basically a vote short from doing that. So what are we going to do in 2018? We're going to pick up where we left off and get back at reforming health care. We're going to get back at reforming these entitlements. And we're going to take on welfare reform, which is another big entitlement program where we're basically paying people, able-bodied people, not to work, and we're depriving them with all these disincentives from going into the workforce. This good economy we're going to get out of this faster-growing economy, is going to produce higher wages and more demand for good-paying jobs.
Well, you know what?
And that's what's going to, so welfare reform is the perfect time to do welfare reform.
Democrats can't wait for you to take that move because they think that's going to help them a lot in 2018. When you look at the generic matchup right now, Democrats are up by 11% in House races if you just pick, a Democrat over a Republican. So how are you going to tackle these things and still maintain your majority in 2018?
I'll take results over rhetoric any day of the year, of the month.
Okay, so he is very honest about the fact that they want welfare reform, and other members of the GOP have been clear about that as well. Now, here's the issue. What that Fox News host said about Democrats looking forward to them trying to take that on is actually very true, because several polls have indicated that the American public does not want cuts to these programs. And I'm not just talking about liberals, I'm not just talking about Democrats, I'm talking about Americans in general. One of the more recent polls was done by the Kaiser Family Foundation, and the results, to be quite honest with you, surprised me. So let's get right to it. Graphic 27, 12% of American adults want to see President Trump and Congress decrease spending for Medicaid. Only 12% of American adults.
And let me just pause there, because that's such an amazing number. Because Medicare and Social Security you pay into, and that's why they're called entitlements, because you're entitled to them, it's your goddamn money. Medicaid is for the poor. So I want to applaud and celebrate the decency of the overwhelming majority of Americans who say, even though it doesn't go to most of us, it goes to the poor, I don't want you to cut it. That's actually great news. So these guys, these Republicans think, well, we'll trick them on everything. We said that the tax cuts wouldn't go to the rich, and then almost all of them go to the rich. And now we'll cut their Medicaid and Medicare, and we'll trick. You're not going to trick them on that. It's going to be deeply unpopular.
So I I'm about to say something that's my own take and my own speculation, okay? I don't have the data in front of me, so take it with a grain of salt. But I actually think that the people who are saying like, no, don't cut this, we want to maintain the funding for it, are people who at some point in their lives probably needed to rely on Medicaid. I mean, when you think about income inequality in the country right now, when you think about that growing gap between the rich and the poor, I personally know people who identify as conservative Republicans who have relied on Medicaid during hard times and actually said they love the program, and for some reason have this weird cognitive dissonance where they don't realize, hey, the party that you keep voting for wants to cut it. But nonetheless, I think that a lot of people have had to rely on it, and so that's the reason why they want to keep it.
Yeah, and so you're right, and a huge percentage of Americans have either done it or know people that have done it, especially because of, like you said, the suppressed wages, et cetera. But when you get more into the numbers, you see that it's not just a Democratic thing, and it's not just people who have used Medicaid, because the numbers are too large.
So let's give you some more numbers from this particular survey. 4 in 10 prefer to increase Medicaid spending, and nearly half, 47%, want funding levels to remain the same. So most Americans want the funding to remain the same, and some portion of the country, 4 out of 10, actually want more funding for Medicaid.
So when they go to cut Medicaid and only 12% approve, at some point, reality does catch up with you. So I know they'll have more money again, in terms of the congressional elections. Again, the Republicans usually do. And although now the small donors for the Democrats are overpowering the big donors of Republicans for the first time I've ever seen in my life. It started with Bernie Sanders, and then in these special elections, especially in Virginia, small donors made a gigantic difference for the Democrats. But they can try to trick people to no end, but if they've actually used the government program, and it's not theoretical, so maybe they don't see the trillions of dollars of tax cuts going to the rich. They don't see it with their own eyes. They don't see them buying the mansions or the yachts. But they know this, their Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid in their own life. And that's what leads to even Republicans thinking that it would be a terrible idea to cut Medicaid.
So let's focus on Republicans specifically. And this is yet another poll that Pew Research did that surprised me and shocked me. So according to data from the Pew Research Center, only 15% of those who identify as Republicans support decreasing funding for Medicare. Only 10% of Republicans support decreased funding for Social Security, an entitlement program primarily benefiting older Americans after retirement. So most Republicans do not want cuts to Medicare, they don't want cuts to Social Security, and Speaker Ryan is right there saying clearly and very transparently that that is what they are going to target. They are going to target entitlement reforms. And by the way, I didn't miss the fact that he said, oh, these are able-bodied people taking advantage. Most people who take advantage of programs like Medicaid are poor, okay? They have to qualify for it. And also Social Security and Medicare, yeah, it's again an entitlement program because we have paid into it. We have paid into it. People who get to a certain age in their lives should be able to receive their Social Security benefits without worrying about goons like you cutting it.
So majority of Americans above the age of 65 voted for Trump. If he goes to cut their Social Security and Medicare, there is going to be a heavy political price to pay. Those programs are so deeply popular, and they keep people afloat. They keep them alive. So that is cutting to the bone. It is a terrible political mistake that I hope they make. I hope they don't succeed, that they try it and then they fail and they pay the political price, because that is what their intent is. They've been trying. Even Eisenhower warned about it. He was a Republican, and he said there's only a certain number of conservatives who want to cut Social Security and Medicare. They're usually Texas oil billionaires, the Bushes, anyway, not quite billionaires, but oil men from Texas, and the really rich, and they are stupid, he said. And here they are again, decades later, trying the same damn thing. And even Republicans, even not on Social Security, on Medicare, but they said, okay, should we cut funding for programs for America's needy? And only 37% said yes. Most of them said no, even if it doesn't apply to me, don't cut it, right? And when it comes to them, I mean, these numbers are minuscule. Only 15% of Republicans supporting cutting Medicare, only 10% cutting Social Security. They're gonna run into a brick wall with that so-called genius Paul Ryan leading the way. And Trump said he would never touch them. And of course, every single thing he said during the campaign was a lie. This is likely to be a lie. I hope he leads this charge and that it's his Waterloo. And then Americans finally wake up and go, oh, right. They meant to take my money and give it to the rich. Yes, that's the whole point of the Republican Party.
Exactly. All right, moving on to some international news. Russia will hold its elections on March 18th of 2018, and Vladimir Putin, who is the current president of Russia, is planning on getting ahead of possible foreign agents who try to meddle in the country's elections. Now, he has called for a new foreign agents law, which essentially would force social media companies or any type of media company that has any type of exposure in Russia to be deemed worthy of investigation. And if there is any foreign player involved in that company, then they have to list themselves as a foreign agent. Now, here's what he had to say while he was talking to leaders in Russia's parliament. He says that we need to look carefully at how some companies work in internet, in social media, and how widely they are involved in our domestic political life. It should be carefully analyzed how they are operating and will be operating during the presidential election. Now, anyone who hears that statement might say, you know what, okay, that's reasonable. You don't want foreign countries to meddle in elections. We're very much concerned about Russia meddling in our elections. But you also have to take into account how Vladimir Putin operates in Russia. Remember that the last time he was reelected was in 2011, and there were mass protests because there's no real election. It's already predetermined that he is going to be the winner, and I'll tell you how. And right now, there is someone who's trying to challenge him in the election, and they're preventing him from being able to run, and I'll tell you that in just a second. But Jake, jump in.
Yeah, so look, I think the US is going a little too far in going after Russian media outlets. So RT's a mixed bag. Sputnik definitely does just pure propaganda for Putin and the Russian oligarchs. But I don't like, okay, so they do propaganda, and Al Jazeera is owned by Qatar, and BBC is owned by the British, and CNN is largely owned by the establishment here in the US. And so, and MSNBC is owned by Comcast. Everybody serves someone, right?
Right.
That's why I think independent media is really important. So I think we overdo it. He's trying to go, oh yeah, then I'm going to target you guys.
Yeah.
And so, but he has the same kind of disingenuous reaction as a lot of the right wing here do. Like, oh my golly gee, I hear there's gambling in this establishment. People are trying to meddle in elections, and it's an obvious strike back, and it's totally disingenuous.
Yeah, I really like our master graphic. I feel like it's very smart.
It's clever.
Yeah. Anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about someone who is attempting to challenge him in the election and how he is being stopped. His name is Alexei Navalny, and he has been a very outspoken opponent of Vladimir Putin, despite the fact that some of his friends, who were also opponents, were murdered while they were protesting Putin after the 2011 election. Now, Navalny has been drawing a lot of attention to the oligarchs in Russia and also Russian corruption, and he was punished for doing so by facing these trumped up criminal charges involving embezzlement. So let me give you the details about that. Graphic 36A. Navalny has been repeatedly dragged into court on charges of fraud and embezzlement. In the summer of 2013, though, he was sentenced to a 5-year prison term, which was changed to a suspended sentence when thousands of people again took to the streets risking arrest. At the end of 2014, Navalny was sentenced to house arrest and his brother was imprisoned, in effect taken hostage. Now, Navalny did not fight these charges. He went to the courts, the European courts, to fight, and he appealed all of his convictions to the European Court on Human Rights, where he has won every single time. Most recently, the European Court labeled Navalny's 2014 conviction and sentence as arbitrary. So in Russia, though, he's still considered a convicted criminal, which prevents him from running against Vladimir Putin. So anytime there's opposition against Putin, someone is either exiled, emigrate to another country, or they're mysteriously murdered, or they have to face these weird random criminal charges when they haven't really, there's no proof that they've actually done anything wrong.
So every country has its elites, and a lot of them try to find different ways to give you false choices by the time you're voting in the election. So some are more sophisticated, some are very blatant. So in Iran, it's the mullahs. You can't run for president unless you've gotten approval from the mullahs. That means the Iranian people have false choices. So it's a really conservative guy approved by the mullahs, or kind of a moderate, but in reality super right-winger also approved by the mullahs. In China, it's the communist committees that decide who will be allowed to run and who won't. They took Hong Kong back, and Hong Kong lost their democracy. All of a sudden, they got 2 Chinese communist government approved candidates, and they're like, what? You still have democracy? Now vote for the 2 guys we really, really like, and we'll control your lives. So here in America, our elites are the donors, and they're a tiny, tiny fraction of America, and arguably a smaller fraction. No, definitely. I saw Larry Lessig did a presentation on this. A smaller fraction than the communist committees in China as a percentage of the population. So our donors get to decide who our false choices are. And then in a general election, everybody yells at you and says, no, you have to vote for the less monstrous person. And that's true, I would vote for the less monstrous one, but that's why primaries are so important. That's why now small donors, I think, are making a big difference in upending this system, and why we got to get money out. But we do have false choices here in America too. But in Russia, it's more brazen and it's more of a sham. You literally can't go on the ballot unless Putin approves it.
You can't have anything aired on television in Russia unless Putin approves it.
So what kind of a sham election is it? I mean, Saddam Hussein would be slightly embarrassed at how fake these elections are. So Putin's, I will decide who is running against me. You schmuck of the earth, you. But you're being strong. No, you're not allowed on the ballot.
No, but you're absolutely right about that, because they will literally reach out to people that they want to run against Putin to make it appear as if there is some sort of option there for the voters. Which is why in 2011 there were so many protests, right? Look, I'm not talking about Russia in the context of what happened in this past election in the United States, right? This is completely separate. I just want to remind all the people who are vociferously defending Russia because of their hatred for Hillary Clinton that Russia has its issues because of Putin. Putin is a terrible person. He's murdered journalists, he's murdered opponents, okay? He's the one who was behind all of the anti-gay laws that passed in 2012. He's a bad guy. And so for those who are trying to make excuses for him and make it seem as though Russia's hunky-dory and politicians in the United States are just making it seem like things are bad there. No, things are bad there.
Okay, so by the way, just to give you a sense of, in 2012, 3 people tried to run against him: Navalny, Nemtsov, and Kasparov. No, not allowed. Kasparov has now been exiled out of the country. Nemtsov was killed in 2015. Gee, I wonder how that happened. And Navalny has been imprisoned, wrongfully so, according to the European Court of Human Rights, and is now being banned. So you speak out against Putin, not only do you not go on television, you easily wind up 6 feet under. You try to oppose him. Eventually, they had another Russian oligarch run against Putin in that election, and Putin got 63% of the vote. When you rig the election and you have no competition and you only get 63%, Saddam got a higher percentage of that. Let's be absolutely clear. There is no real elections in Russia. There is no democracy in Russia. Putin is not the president of Russia, he's the dictator of Russia.
And one other thing I wanted to add, Navalny is still in Russia and is still calling out Putin for corruption, still trying to, go after him pretty aggressively. And that takes a lot of courage, especially when you consider what happened to his friends.
And his brother. No, the people opposing Putin, their courage is unreal. I can't imagine. I mean, you are taking a gigantic risk with your life if you're opposing Putin, and they're still doing it. It is some of the most courageous acts I've ever seen.
Let's take one more break. When we come back, police officers who were fired for some of the most insane crimes were rehired in different departments. I'll tell you where.
All right, post game here in Studio B. It's a green screen magic of internet television.
A lot of condom breaking stories.
Any conversation that starts with marriage is an interesting thing deserves a little bit of.
When the kid cries, perhaps that's the that is an opportunity to do some. It's an opportunity to do some parenting.
Yeah, parenting is you cry, you're gone.
Oh my God. I love that video.
Yeah, Ben, I got a great achoo. You're like, my mouth was open, she sneezed in my eye.
I used to have Donut Tower next to my desk.
Yeah, I'll dress up like a girl.
I sound confident now, Anna. When we're off the air, I'm gonna be like, how is this gonna work?
When you get literally asked why 21 straight times.
Yeah.
And like at some point, you're like, you're fucking with me now, right?
So I dumped the kids off at her mom's, and I drove down to La Jolla for a day.
Get out, kids.
They're like, but Daddy, no.
Why? What do you mean, why? You asked me to look at you. You did it. You brought it up. You know you're doing it. What do you mean, why? I don't know why. I was reading. She's lovely. Here's what's different. Like, it is a different feeling. Everybody says this, but it's 5:11 when we're shooting this. I can't wait to go home. Like that, I can't wait to see her.
What you guys do is allow us to be open and honest, and we don't have to worry about censorship, and we don't have to worry about sponsors telling us what we can and can't say. We're accountable by our audience and our audience only, and I absolutely love that. That's the best part about being a member. We love you guys.
Hey, Cenk, what's up?
Aaron, I want to do a YouTube live clip, but not live. Go.
Young Turks. Ashura Izumi writes in, I love the taste of Republican tears when they bitch and cry when they lose. Well, I love that tweet. Bud Askins writes in, Paul Ryan speaks about, quote, able-bodied people getting to work as he kowtows to a president who has never done an honest day work in his life. I just want to note that Paul Ryan went to college when his father died because of government assistance. So he took the government assistance. I think it was Social Security, if I remember right, because it also applies to families that have lost, et cetera. But you could look into it. I covered the story a couple times before. But he took government checks to go to college, and afterwards he says, "Oh, these bums, they're not these able-bodied people just not working, taking government assistance."
But the thing that they'll always turn around and say is, "Well, his dad paid into the system, and so he's entitled." But they never extend that argument for, I don't know, millennials, for instance, that have been paying Social Security out of their paychecks every single time. Like, do you know how many millennials, myself included, are worried that we'll never get to see that money ever? Like, it's gone. And we can't let that happen. We got to fight.
Yeah, Paul Ryan looking to burn the bridge after him. Okay, Trump apparently just tweeted this, not at #TYT Live, although that would have been fun. He says, in the East, it could be the coldest New Year's Eve on record. Perhaps we could use a little bit of that good old global warming that our country, but not other countries, was going to pay trillions of dollars to protect against. Bundle up. Yeah, so we had 4 days of 100 degrees in LA in the fall. What was it, in October or November, right? So, yes, in the midst of global warming, there are still cold days, you fucking moron. Okay. Anyway, all right, guys, members of the day are Alan Grant and Laura A. Cash, cold hard cash. All right, thank you guys. Today we do have lots of fun stuff for you guys. Aggressive Progressive is off this week for the holidays, but we got a post game for you today. We've got Old School that we shot yesterday, if you remember. Of course, you get the whole 2-hour show ad-free. And right now there's a special program. You guys have heard me talk about it before. You can give it as a gift. 3 months of membership, just so you can check it out, for just $25. So tytnetwork.com/gift. That's the way to do that. And then one last thing, don't forget, if you're gonna buy anything in the Resist collection on shoptyt.com, 25% off with promo code TREATYOURSELF. Okay, there it is, treat yourself.
You're such a dork.
Agreed.
I remember when I first started working here, you were kind of cool. Like,
agree to disagree.
You were kind of cool.
I would argue I was less cool. Okay, anyway, let's go forward.
What happens to cops after they get fired, getting caught sleeping with prostitutes while they're on the clock, or refusing to respond to calls when their other officers are at risk? Well, they get fired and then later hired at other smaller departments. At least those were the findings of an expose done by the Washington Post, which was excellent in terms of investigative reporting, and found that cops who were fired from the New Orleans Police Department were later hired at smaller departments nearby. So here's what they found. In the past decade, the department has fired or otherwise pushed out at least 248 officers. Of those forced out, 53 have been hired by other police departments. Mind you that out of those 53, there have been cases of police officers who then got fired at other departments and then rehired at other departments and then fired again and then hired again. It's insane. Okay. So I'm gonna give you the details, and they did profile a couple of the officers. I don't have time to get into every single one that they profiled, but the officer that stood out the most to me was Kerry Dykes. And when I tell you his story, it is just unbelievable. So former New Orleans police superintendent Ronald Serpas, said that sheriffs and other chiefs often justify rehiring officers by dismissing their problems as political. As a result, troubled officers remain in policing, he said. Another finding through this report is that smaller departments usually don't, or say they don't have the resources to train young, new police officers, and that it's actually cheaper to just rehire people who have already been trained. So that kind of goes to the point that keeps coming up over and over again when police brutality stories make headlines. There are issues with training, and in some cases, police officers who have been fired because of the fact that they haven't been following guidelines, or in some cases have broken laws, get rehired because the smaller departments are like, oh, he was trained at some point long ago.
Yeah, and when they say political, they don't mean someone was fervently Republican or Democrat. And sure, there could be a couple of cases of office politics, but largely they mean this guy beat the living crap out of someone, and I guess he got caught and it got in the media, so it got all political and they had to let him go. But we're happy to have him beat the living crap out of people at our department.
This is insane. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Kerry Dykes, the officer that I mentioned earlier. So he had been fired by the department in New Orleans because he was caught up in a sting operation. They had to conduct a sting operation on one of their own police officers because they had reason to suspect that he was using his time as a cop to sleep with prostitutes. So Kerry Dykes was suspended 3 times for violating department policies, including failing to follow instructions and filing incomplete reports. Now, those were some of the initial issues that the department experienced with him. In July of 2010, a woman told police officials that an officer was paying women for sex. She told internal affairs investigators that the officer spent some of his nightly shifts cruising the streets, quote, picking up women, working girls. She complained that she had sex with him but was not paid. Okay, so the department decided to investigate this, to their credit. And through their investigation, they actually found that there were motel records that showed that Dykes rented a room, a $45 room, checking in with his driver's license at 2:50 a.m. in the middle of his patrol shift. So that was evidence that essentially reinforced what the woman came forward with. Then from the sting operation, they found that yes, indeed, he was using that time to sleep with prostitutes, and that on the sting's 5th night, investigators watched Dykes park his squad car at the London Lodge at 3:35 a.m. Almost an hour later, a 911 call came in from nearby. 2 men had wrecked a Chevy Tahoe and fled on foot, armed with assault rifles. So he was called immediately to come help. He ignored that call. Then gunfire broke out. He ignored that call as well. Things got so bad that some of the police officers were actually concerned that maybe something happened to him. Like, let's go check in. Why isn't he responding to these calls? They go to his car and they find that he's asleep.
Yeah. So there's a host of issues here. The most minor one was one we haven't even discussed here, but I'm saying minor in terms of the treatment that it's gotten. But in reality, it's perhaps the most important one, is that he was sued for assaulting people several times for brutality. One time he assaulted a pregnant woman. They did a small payout for her. And another time he was, quote, he brutally beat a man with nightsticks. And so that these days has become a minor problem. I mean, he beats the living crap out of people, and as a cop that we've empowered him with a gun and a badge, etc. But it's easier to catch him on the other stuff. Like, because for cops, they're like, no, that was the pregnant woman seemed a little unruly. That's why I kicked her ass, right? But it's harder to make excuses when you're sleeping in your patrol car and another cop takes a picture of it while you're supposed to be helping other cops who are getting shot at. And by the way, one of the reasons that this guy is kicked out, whereas others are protected, is you're endangering fellow cops' lives, and that they have no tolerance for.
Exactly, and keep in mind, this is someone who is using his time getting paid by taxpayer money to break the law. right? Look, I think prostitution should be legal, but keep in mind, he is sleeping with prostitutes, which is a crime, right? He is clearly breaking the law, and you would think, all right, well, he's gotten fired and that's it, his police career is over. But no, it wasn't over. He actually got hired by a different department. So months after he was fired, Dykes applied for a police job at Delgado Community College in New Orleans, and on August 5th of 2011, the community college offered him a job with its police force, hiring him for about $12,000 less than he said he made in New Orleans. So he got hired at a community college.
So the local police departments, the sheriff departments, hire people for two reasons. One, Anna told you about in length, because it's easier because they're already certified. The other is because they're willing to take a pay cut since they can't get hired anywhere else. So like, oh, you're gonna work for cheap because you used to beat the crap out of people and sleep with prostitutes, and by the way, not even pay them, not have the decency to pay them,
right?
While you're supposed to be working, protecting the community. Like, but with him, like, I'm kind of glad he wasn't on the beat. You know, I'd rather probably have him sleeping in his car than protecting the community. But come on, when people are getting shot at, especially your fellow officers, get up already, Jesus Christ.
So he gets hired at this community college, and then he actually applies for a second policing job. In July of 2016, while employed at Delgado, Dykes secured a second job at the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office as a reserve duty sheriff. He continues to work at both departments. So that is essentially what happens. And in Louisiana, they have a certification program, right? So if you want to be a cop, you have to have certain credentials, you have to be certified to be a cop. If you do anything wrong, if you do anything illegal, you are supposed to be decertified. That way you don't get hired at other departments. The Washington Post found that in the last decade, not a single cop has been decertified.
Yeah, of course, because they protect their own, and right or wrong. And so, last thing on this is, police unions are an excellent case for and against unions. Man, that union protects its own more than anything I have ever seen. If you're in that union, you're made for life. You know how many times this guy, Dykes, violated police department rules? 17 times, and they still couldn't fire him. And they had to go and they had to do a sting and they had to catch him with the motel with the hookers and sleeping, and all they had to do all this stuff to finally fire him. So unions do protect you. On the other hand, sometimes they protect these cops at the expense of everyone else. So upside and downside, but they are strong, and when you have a strong union, it does protect the workers.
Shifting gears to completely different news that really caught my attention and I wanted to share with you guys. Former Dr. Phil guests are now speaking out against the show, alleging that the show's staff enabled their drug addiction or alcohol addiction in an effort to gain ratings for their program. Now, Todd Herzog is one example that was detailed in statnews.com. Stat News, in addition to Boston Globe, published this report that was illuminating. However, the staff at Dr. Phil claimed that none of this is true. They are denying all of it. Nonetheless, I want to give you the details of what's being alleged. So Todd Herzog was on Dr. Phil's show because he had an alcohol addiction. And he claims that after he traveled to Los Angeles to be on the show, he went into the green room and found that there was a bottle of vodka there. He also claimed that he was given drugs right before he went on air. Take a look at what he has to say.
I show up to the studios and I'm sober, I'm hurting a lot and I'm shaking. My dad was there and I went and talked to him in his dressing room and I was completely sober. And then they pull me into my dressing room and there was 2 liters of vodka and like some Red Bulls and orange juice and stuff like that. You know, being unsupervised by my parents, I drank the entire bottle. And then at some point somebody gave me a Xanax. They said, this will calm your nerves. And so I had been drinking and took a Xanax, which I've never taken Xanax before in my life. And I know that can be a deadly combination, so why it was given to me, I don't know.
Todd, Dr. Phil. Hi, I'm Todd.
Next thing you know, I'm being carried onto the stage because I can barely walk.
How drunk do you think you are right now?
An entire bottle of vodka.
Keep going. 0.263. What's going to happen to you if you keep drinking like you're drinking?
I'm gonna die.
So Herzog said that he showed up to the studios completely sober. His father was with him and has corroborated that. And Herzog says that he found the alcohol in the dressing room. Also, according to this report, guests have been left without medical help as they face withdrawal from drugs. The investigation is found, and one person said she was directed by a show staff member to an open-air drug market to find heroin for her detoxing niece. Now, people are usually traveling from out of state in order to be on the show, and for about 2 days, they don't have access to whatever drug that they're addicted to, and so they'll suffer from extreme withdrawals. And according to this one allegation, while one person was suffering a withdrawal, one of the producers or staff members on the show directed her to go find heroin at one specific place.
So I don't like the exploitation of the show overall, and so people have different views on it. And they think some people will tell you that Dr. Phil has helped them a lot. For the people that have been on the show, the audience obviously likes it. It's very highly rated. He's the highest paid television personality in the country. You know how much he makes? He makes $79 million a year. Wow, right? So there's a lot of money on the line here. I don't like the carnival atmosphere, so he will upbraid his guests, and the audience will cheer. It feels like we're back at the Coliseum, and like, oh, you carry the guy out, and we all do a little bit of Schadenfreude, and we all judge a little bit, and then somebody's yelling at him, telling him to tough love and straighten him. So look, I know it's a mixed bag. I'm sure he has helped some people. He says, I'm going to stay in your life forever. Really, all those guests, all those years, Dr. Phil's good friends with them and stayed in their life forever. I would be dramatically surprised. So the show denies everything. One of their, Martin Greenberg, psychologist who serves as the show's director of professional affairs, says that this particular story about Herzog is, quote, absolutely unequivocally untrue. So, I mean, look, if you think about it logically, how did he get that drunk right before the show?
Yeah, and also there were some contradictions in that statement. In that, at first, the Boston Globe and Stat News were told that every guest is with a professional being monitored the entire time. So if that were the case, then that person would find the alcohol and stop Herzog from drinking it, and then later on recanted that statement, which I thought was interesting. So I don't know what the truth is. I mean, we're not investigators, we're not investigating this story, but at this point, several people have come forward and said, no, there's been some enabling going on, and the suspicion is that enabling takes place because it creates the drama that you see on the show.
Look, they don't get good ratings because they're helping people. There's a lot of different organizations that help people that don't have TV shows and wouldn't get good ratings. They get ratings because people get to feel like, oh, we get to shame that person. And it just bothers me to my core, but a lot of TV shows do. I can't stand The Biggest Loser. Like, oh yeah, look at that. And then they make them take their shirts off, and then they judge under the guise of helping them. And some people, I'm sure they help. But it's not for me. It makes me sick to my stomach.
It's the reason why I think a lot of reality shows do as well as they do. It's because people, I think it's more a commentary on society and what people want to see than anything else, right? People like to see train wrecks. People like to see others in a tragic situation for some reason. It was true of a lot of, talk shows that I experienced growing up.
Now, we know why, because it makes them feel a little bit better about themselves.
We're all bullies in some way, and it's kind of sad.
It's true, and it allows us to laugh at other people. And that makes me cringe. I can't. And so, in some ways, it's emotional porn. Yeah. And to me, that's deeply problematic. So no matter who's right in this story, the overall tenor of the show is kind of like, while pretending to help someone, a little bit of ha-ha. And that dragging him out there in that shape.
Yeah.
Come on, you can't justify that under any circumstance. You know you're doing it for the ratings. Why don't you bring him to a hospital? Dr. Phil said in that show, I've never talked to a guest who's closer to death. Then bring him to the hospital instead of trotting him out for ratings.
Final story for you guys, update on something we talked about yesterday. Recently, Vanity Fair received a lot of backlash for a video it published telling Hillary Clinton to get a hobby. And in that video, in a very small part, one of the women working at Vanity Fair said that she should take up a hobby like knitting. Now, people said that that was sexist. We had a conversation about it. I disagreed. I didn't think it was meant to be sexist. However, Vanity Fair did decide to apologize. And their apology goes as follows. It was an attempt at humor, and we regret that it missed the mark. Okay, that was it. That was the apology, which isn't really much of an apology, and I don't really think they have to apologize. Like, let's all move on with our lives.
I think that apology was fitting for the offense.
Okay, fair, I agree. Okay, so who wanted to chime in on this debacle? Donald Trump.
Of course.
Because here's the thing, Donald Trump, I mean, he's done everything he needs to do as president. He's succeeded in everything. We're all living better lives. And so since he's got a little bit of time on his hands, why not golf and go after Vanity Fair for apologizing? So here's what his tweet said. Vanity Fair, which looks like it's on its last legs. Okay, let's just stop right there. Okay. Is there anyone that he has criticized where he didn't include something about how their careers are over, or they're on their last leg, or their ratings are down? Like, that's like his go-to insult.
Well, I'll tell you why, and why it's, even if you've got him committing a crime, it's gonna be super hard to get, potentially super hard to get him out of office. Because during a campaign rally, he once gave an anecdote, so super weird, rambling anecdote about a guy at a party among the very rich, and how he had lost his fortune. And Trump thought that was the worst thing in the world, and everybody looked at him with shame. He used to be rich, but he's not rich anymore. And he just gave it as like a parable for like the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. So that's why he thinks like, your career is ending, is the worst thing ever, right? And that's his view of life. You're either winning or you're losing, and losers live in eternal shame.
You're losing, dude. You're losing. You're chiming in on this ridiculous nonsense. You're losing. You're a loser already. You've lost. You're done. You're done. Okay. Anyway, let me read the rest of this ridiculous juvenile tweet. Vanity Fair, which looks like it's on its last leg, is bending over backwards in apologizing for the minor hit they took at Crooked Hillary, or Crooked H. Okay. They're not bending over backwards. Let's go back to the first graphic. They said that it was an attempt at humor, and we regret that it missed the mark.
That's a shout apology.
Oh, they're bending over backwards though. Okay. They're doing backflips.
It was a big apology, a giant apology, like the giant ocean water that surrounds Puerto Rico, which is an island.
Someone take Twitter away from him, please. It's embarrassing. Like, more than I'm embarrassed. I'm tired of being embarrassed, okay? I wish I was tired of winning, but I'm not. I'm tired of feeling embarrassed every day.
Yeah, so, and that's why it gets under his skin when you mention that he lost the Electoral College, because then he'd be a loser and he'd have to live in shame. Oh my God, when they can't take him out of the White House, he's gonna feel such deep shame.
It's gonna be the best thing in the world.
Best day in American history when that happens. And because, yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay, guys, we got Rebel Headquarters next. We got two great candidates for you guys and guests, and a really interesting update, a dramatic update at Rebel Headquarters at the top of the show. But these folks are taking on the establishment, and they have really unique stories, and I think that you're gonna like them. They're both Bernie supporters. So come check that out in about 5 minutes, and then we'll do the post game afterwards with Anna and I. For all the members, last couple of days here, tytnetwork.com/gift to get membership for 3 months. All right, bye-bye. All right, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, but you knew that. So, fun, exciting announcement for you guys. Randy Bryce, the guy taking on Paul Ryan, otherwise known as Iron Stash, has joined the Just Democrats. So he is an iron worker. He did a super fun ad taking on Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan might not even run, who knows? And that is actually a pretty close district. So it would be phenomenal if an uncorrupted, strong progressive Just Democrat beat Paul Ryan in his home district when he's a Speaker of the House. So great to have him on. So 51 candidates for the Just Democrats. Speaking of which, I have one in the studio right here, right now. Okay, introducing Rick Trevino. He is from the great state of Texas, running in the 23rd district. He's running against Republican Will Hurd. We'll get to William Hurd in a second. First, Rick, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Great to have you here.
I appreciate the opportunity, Cenk.
Okay, so how did you get into politics in the first place? What did you do beforehand, and how did you get roped in here?
Well, I think to understand me, you have to understand my background as a teacher. You know, like LBJ, I got my first lesson in poverty as a teacher, and it's an experience that changed my life. You know, seeing every day what poverty does to a community. You seeing my kids, some of my students abandon their dreams because they can't afford college. You know, watching a student over the course of a year lose weight because they don't have food at home, or losing students to violence in the community. I mean, all those things greatly affected me. And as another thing that really put me in the position to run for office, you know, put it all on the line, is I'm a Latino, I'm a Mexican American, and I'm very proud of my heritage. And my mother's from Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. My dad's from Laredo, a border town. Understand the experience of living on the border, and these border communities are safe and have been demonized and described as violent areas by both the left and the right. And it's very upsetting to hear that. And on top of that, you know, the Democratic Party really only talks to the Latino community with sophistication about one issue, that's immigration. And even on that issue, the representation is pretty lackluster. I mean, the decision for DACA has just been kicked down. They kicked the can down the street again. And instead of having Democrats to put it on the line and shut the government down to protect the lives of these people who really should have been protected by the Democratic Party long ago. It's upsetting, but there's no message about our healthcare, our economy, our infrastructure, our education, and we deserve that respect too. And one of the narratives coming out of the Alabama race when Jones won was that, you know, the African American voter needs to be treated with respect. And I think the Democratic Party really treats Latinos and African Americans as captured electorates, and that's not a spot you want to be in. And another thing, the Democratic Party lifts up certain Latinos that are not part of this movement. They're not there fighting for Medicare for all, or a living wage, or free public colleges, universities, or creating a foreign policy that is peaceful. You know, it's a real shame because the Latino community is, you know, is progressive. I haven't heard anybody in my district say, you know what, Mr. Trevino, I think my pharmaceuticals are reasonably priced. And no one's defending their insurance. No one's defending the type of representation that they're getting. And really people want more. And, you know, the Latino community isn't conservative. It's progressive. It wants real answers. It wants tangible outcomes for themselves. And that's what I'm trying to provide, authentic, bona fide progressivism, you know?
So Doug Applegate was on the show. He's another Just Democrat. And he talked about how the Democratic Party keeps dangling a carrot in front of people's faces, right, with a stick. But you can never reach it. You can never reach it. And I think that part of the reason Doug Jones won was because he actually helped people in the community. He put away those Klan guys that had murdered those poor African American kids. He did something for African Americans in Alabama, and it made a huge difference. So they showed up for him in record numbers. It's amazing what happens when instead of dangling the carrot, you actually deliver the carrot.
That's right.
Right? And in the case of Latinos, I think what the Democratic leadership is doing on DACA is unconscionable. They said that they'd fight for it. They bragged about how they already got Trump to agree to it. And now when they have leverage in a budget showdown, they're saying they're not going to fight for it.
That's right, and you know, Nancy Pelosi was really upset when, you know, DACA recipients, you know, protested at her press conference. But I think what that movement and what they're trying to do is to say, don't pit us against our community. Don't pit us against our parents, because they're acting like DACA students are a bargaining chip. And they're human beings. They deserve that humanity, and they really deserve a Democratic Party that will go to the bathroom. They'll put it all on the line for them, whether it means shutting the government down, whether it means being more harsh with our rhetoric. They deserve humane treatment by our government, and right now they're a bargaining chip, and it's, like I said, it's abhorrent to watch. And I know DACA recipients. Some of my students were DACA students, and a lot of them went back into the shadows after Trump won. There is legitimate fear, and this whole dog whistle politics, that has been existing since the Southern Strategy, 68 or whatever. And I think it culminated in the Trump movement, and now there's no more dog whistle. It's just flat out bigotry, and we need bold, progressive representation that's really going to stand up and say no to this. And the type of representation 23 gets is, middle of the road, moderate, conservative. And and this is my personal opinion. Just, this is my first rodeo doing something like this, running for a big stage like this. But I do believe in areas that are predominantly Latino, they have been sacrificed for big industries, because the Democratic Party appears, ostensibly to be the party of the working class, right? But the past few decades, we see decision after decision cater to the 1%. And, if that's the case, if the Democratic Party really is this, they have to be honest about it. And what they're doing is, these districts like 23, they get someone in there that's a moderate, and it cultivates these backdoor relationships with ExxonMobil or the private prison industries. And the Democratic Party does have tight relationships with these industries, and they are facilitated in these districts, because whoever represents those districts, they're not there to represent the constituents. They're there to perpetuate the capital gains of whatever industry needs them, right? And I think this District 23 deserves someone that's 100% involved in their issues. And my campaign is completely rooted in the issues and the people of 23.
And look, it's again another case where the election is incredibly winnable. Hillary Clinton won the district, right. So there's no reason why an uncorrupted progressive candidate can't win that district. I want to put up the links for Rick, and we'll have them down below so that you could easily click on them. If you want to volunteer, that's great. You want to donate, that's great, because everybody needs staff. You need the voter rolls. Right. You need all this stuff, and go check out his website as well. So wherever you're watching this later, the links will be down below. And with the part I don't understand about your story, though, is when did you become a country singer?
I've been getting that joke since I was in elementary school. My first day of elementary, I was gonna go register, and then the lady's like, "Oh, like the country singer." And sure enough, all across West Texas and South Texas, I've been hearing people say like, "Hey man, like the country singer." I'm like, well, yeah, I stopped writing hits. Now I'm running for Congress, right? But no, it's something I've gotten a lot, but it's something that I think is gonna help me out, actually.
Yeah, they might help you win. That's right. So I was thinking of renaming myself Kid Rock, but decided against it.
Yeah.
Stuck with Cenk Uygur, which has been a really winning name for me. Okay, but in reality, you were a national delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016, and I noticed a couple other fights. You fought against TPP.
That's right.
Why is that?
So I'm a union guy. I'm a union teacher. I think, I cut my teeth as a union guy, and I think I was really influenced by that atmosphere. The TPP is, the biggest fight in the last decade, really, for trade unions, and it was incredible to watch every major trade union in the country say no to the TPP and fast track. And Democratic representatives in San Antonio, my own congressional delegation, we couldn't get an answer on what they were going to do till the day of the vote. And these are people that receive thousands of dollars from unions, and the least they could do is show some respect. And what was real peculiar is going to Philadelphia, running into other delegates that weren't, Bernie Sanders delegates, and some of them were like, well, what's the TPP? It's incredible that people ascend to this level of the Democratic Party and don't understand what's really going on, aren't able to be self-critical of the party. And I think that's why I am really the best candidate for this, not just because I'm running on this great progressive platform that's advocating for Medicare for all, living wage. I'm the only candidate in the race that's actually running on to reform the Democratic Party, to make it a party that is actually for working people. And we need to be self-critical because the reality is we've lost 1,000 seats all across this country since Obama came in office. And the reason is we're not vision-oriented. And I'm a practical guy. You know, I'll pick up every win I can if I get into DC. But I'm never ever going to lose sight of that goal, that finish line down the end of the race. You know, we have to run towards an idealized version of the world. And that's not a bad thing. We have to have a vision. We have to understand that that our country isn't perfect. We could do a lot better.
This isn't about gaining, you're 1,000% right. This is not about gaining power. It's about exercising that power for actual change, policy change. All right, before we let you go, we did say we wanted to say one thing about Will Hurd, the Republican incumbent.
Sure.
So give me one fact about him.
Well, Will Hurd is an ex-CIA agent. He frames every issue in terms of foreign policy, and the guy's been doing his best to run away from Trump. I think he understands that the district hates Donald Trump, but I'm sorry, buddy, that stink don't come off, man. I could smell that vote from here. And I've run into the guy a few times out on the trail. He's a nice person, but he's just another middle-of-the-road Republican that, is really not there to represent the district, but really there to, be someone to advocate for the business class and the military-industrial complex. And the guy spends a lot of his time not focused on the issues, the domestic issues of 23. He's on the House Intelligence Committee. I mean, that takes a lot of time away. And in the largest congressional district in the United States of America, you deserve someone that's 100% invested in that district, 85% rural, with over 160,000 people without health insurance. It's incredible that, and here's another thing, my Democratic opponents come with this background too. The DCCC and the establishment is saying, well, we got to match Will Hurd's foreign policy chops with someone else. And from what I've seen is that whoever, if it's not me, you're going to get someone in there who's going to sit on one of these committees that is not there to necessarily make us safer. It's to make the defense industry more money. And really, you deserve someone that's invested 100% in the district. And that's what I want to do. I've been all across. I've driven thousands of miles. I've been in cities as small as 100 people to as big as 1 million, like in San Antonio. And all across, I see a lot of hardworking people not making it, who are really looking for answers. And the person or the entity that is missing is the federal government. And if you get Rick Trevino in there, you're going to see the best representation West Texas and Texas has ever seen. At least that's what I'm going to try to do.
All right, Rick Trevino, clearly a strong progressive voice. Maybe not a country singer voice, but a strong progressive voice, which is way more important.
And people have to realize the Bernie Sanders movement is a diverse, multicultural movement. And I want people to see that Latinos, Mexican Americans like these ideas too. All across the country realize that the Latino community is going to be the people that are going to carry that torch, run it to the finish line, and one day we're going to have Medicare for all.
I love it. All right, thank you, Rick, for joining us at Rebel Headquarters.
Pleasure.
True Rebel. And wouldn't it be amazing if these guys were in Congress and next time you're on the show, it's Congressman Trevino.
For sure.
All right, we'll be right back, guys. All right, back on Rebel headquarters, we have another great candidate for you guys, Sarah Smith. She's running in Washington's 9th district. Sarah, welcome to Rebel headquarters.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We got a good, strong Rebel in you. It makes sense that you're at HQ here. So you are a Rebel indeed. You're a strong progressive, and apparently the Democratic establishment in the state of Washington not happy with that. So I did a story recently about how they were denying you some of the voter rolls, et cetera, but I wanted to hear it from you. So what's going on in your race and what are they denying?
So it's been really, really interesting. In my race, they're denying me access to VAN, which I know you explained is the voter access network. It gives us information on who's a Democrat, who's a likely voter. And they said when we asked them for it, they came back and said, okay, in order to have access to VAN, you need to have the endorsement of 50% plus one of the legislative districts, which if you're challenging a Democratic incumbent, I'm sure you know, is extremely difficult to obtain. And so we said, okay, all right, that's fine. And we took a look a little bit deeper and we realized most of our legislative districts either aren't going to endorse at all, don't endorse until after the primary, or don't endorse until the springtime. So if you're a grassroots campaign and you're trying to build grassroots energy, you need to be out the gate and fighting as soon as possible. And they were hamstringing us by not giving us access to this information using what they were claiming was a bylaw. I'm very factual, I love facts. And I was
Bless your heart.
I know, real facts, not alternative facts.
We could use more of that in Congress, yes.
And I asked for a copy of the bylaw. So I have a lot of background working with legal jargon and things like that. I wanted to see it and I wanted to read it for myself. And that's when they kind of clamped down and they started saying, oh, well, why do you want it? And why do you want access? And they started playing games with us. They stopped responding to our emails, and a bunch of my volunteers, some legislative district chairs, vice chairs, all started calling and saying, where's this bylaw? We all want to see it. And then we have some very progressive counties and legislative districts, and they got involved. And they started saying, where's this bylaw? Where's this bylaw? And the last I heard was on a call we weren't involved in. They never talked to us. They said, because we're endorsed by brand new Congress, now that's why they can't give us VAN access.
Why? What does that have to do with anything?
They said that it's because they also endorse Republicans with brand new Congress, which is interesting to me because we poured through Adam Smith's FEC filings, and he's made donations to Republicans before. So we're really confused as to why an organization like Brand New Congress that endorses both is not okay, but a campaign by an actual sitting congressman, he can have VAN access even though he donates to Republicans, which doesn't strike me as in the Democratic Party's best interest. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
Yeah, so, and Brand New Congress is not endorsing a Republican in this race, right? They actually do that. I know I'm not involved with that group at all, but my understanding is very rarely, and certainly not in this race. In this race, they're endorsing you, a very progressive person. And so, but like, how disingenuous it is over the top, because saying that you can get access to the voter rolls as long as you can get people to agree after the primaries, well, then what?
What's the point of the
election's
right?
already happened. It's like
it's already over.
Yeah, because you're running in the primary against the incumbent who's a Democrat, Adam Smith. So, I mean, saying that, they have to be snickering almost, like it's preposterous. Yes. And so it's, why don't you just declare, I am against progressives, I am for incumbents, and I will protect the establishment. It's as bold and brazen as I have seen in any district in the country.
Yes, and it's a bigger point to raise too, is my incumbent Adam Smith is a really strong fundraiser for the Democratic Party as a whole.
Gee, I wonder why they're doing it, can't quite tell.
There it is, quid pro
quo. So well then people will say, okay, Adam Smith, he's a Democrat from that district, why not just keep him?
Oh, because Adam Smith is a 21-year sitting incumbent that has done pretty much nothing. He's never fought for progressive values. He's been a self-described moderate. He's voted in favor of every bad trade deal except for CAFTA. He's a war hawk. He's very comfortable with the war industry. He takes thousands of their dollars and he talks about, oh, we need to increase troop salaries, but he doesn't talk about cutting the 60% of that military budget that goes towards private contractors, who are conveniently also the companies who donate to his campaign. He votes in favor of increasing the military budget, and then he talks about how he voted against one of the appropriations acts, and he says, oh, where are we gonna get this money? Oh, I can tell you, because you voted in favor of increasing it, it's gonna come from Social Security and education. You just don't wanna say it and you don't wanna own it. And after 21 years, he's suddenly saying he's now a progressive as of his August 4th town hall 2017. After 21 years of self-described moderacy, he's all of a sudden a progressive. And he's all of a sudden in favor of Medicare for all. Where were you in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up until this year? Where were you?
Well, it appears that all of a sudden he read a poll and found out how progressive his district has become, and so yeah, I meant Medicare for all. Yeah, of course.
Oh, of course.
Have I not been saying that all along? No, you haven't actually. Oh, well, yeah, I'm saying it now.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the biggest things too is Adam had a chance to represent his very progressive district. We swung in the caucuses 72% for Bernie Sanders. He had his opportunity and his golden chance to demonstrate, I'm gonna vote with my district, and he's a superdelegate. He could have superdelegated for Bernie Sanders like his district wanted him to, but instead he said, and the TLDR version of it is basically, I don't have to do what the voters say, I'm not bound to that, it's more important that I do what the party wants. And he voted for Hillary Clinton. He showed that he's not actually gonna stand up for progressive values. Of course it's easy for him to say he's progressive now when he's not actually gonna have to hold fast to those values with a Republican-controlled House and Senate and presidency. It's easy to say he's a progressive right now because he doesn't actually have to do the work. But when he did have the chance, he did nothing. In 2008, when he had the chance to be a voice for all progressive values and we had the House, Senate, and presidency, Adam Smith said and did nothing.
So you mentioned defense there, and I think that's really important because over and over in these races, I hear the establishment Democrats saying we have to match the Republicans on the defense issue. But there's no polling on that. Actually, people want us to spend less money on defense and less money on the military-industrial complex. That's what the polling indicates. But they say it like it's a fact. Sarah, I get the haunting feeling that it's not that they are worried about what the polling says about the voters, especially in a district that 72% voted for Bernie Sanders. It's that they're worried they're gonna lose the donations from those defense contractors.
Oh yes, and that's a lot of money over the course of my incumbent. That's millions of dollars that they're gonna be losing if they go against it. But reducing the defense budget is, very interestingly, it's a really cross-partisan issue. I see Republicans talking about how we need to be responsible with military spending, which is what I've been saying for a long time. They talk about wanting to pay troops more money. Why aren't soldiers getting paid more? Why are people like Dorothy Gasquet was just on? She talked about welding her own armor onto her own truck. Why is she doing that? Why aren't we recruiting welders to come in? Well, we're paying 3 times as much to contractors because we're spread so thin across so many wars. We're paying all that money to contractors. And those contractors donate lots of money to all these different incumbents, including my incumbent, Adam Smith. They donate lots of money to their campaigns. And no one's talking about reducing those kind of expenditures in favor of actually bolstering our troops.
Yeah, wouldn't it be amazing if we had these strong progressive women take over the delegation in Washington? You guys have been on the show the last couple of days, and it would be amazing. It would be wonderful.
Very biasedly.
So running out of time here, last quick question for you. And it's about how you got into this, because you mentioned legal background, you were a paralegal, you got student debts. How'd you wind up running for Congress?
So I actually, a lot of people have talked about their experience. They were all nominated. I was nominated by a couple of people in my community. I think I'm the only Justice Democrat that doesn't know who it was, and I actually don't want to know. I feel like it makes me work harder, so I told them not to tell me. I've come too far now, and if I find out now, I feel like it's just a house of cards. I'll fall down. It's my mom or something. I'm kidding.
But I don't know either.
So I have a background. I actually worked in foreclosure assistance during the middle of the foreclosure crisis and the recession. I worked as a bankruptcy paralegal when we were coming out of the upswing and everyone was filing for bankruptcy. And then I actually did claims negotiation and bodily injury negotiation for an insurance company for a long time. So I had a bit of a legal background. I've always been politically active. I come from a very political family. Got lots of cool stories about my dad. He actually helped pen the legislation that brought single-payer healthcare to Ireland. He's a United States. Yeah, he's an immigrant into the United States from the UK. He's a super cool guy. He's got a crazy cool story, but it kind of runs in my blood. And I've always done voter drives. I helped participate in anti-war activism during high school after the Iraq War started. I've been pretty involved with volunteer work through Planned Parenthood, through the Humane Society. We organized food drives for my old company, and I was on their volunteer board and everything like that. So I've got a lot of volunteer experience and a lot of legal experience and stuff.
All right, well, the Just Democrat staff done a great job in finding you, and the luck of the Irish, I hope, is on your side. And at least it's easy to remember. It's Adam Smith versus Sarah Smith.
No relation, and his wife's name is Sarah, so sorry.
All right, great to have you here. Good luck with the campaign.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that's Rebel Headquarters for today. Oh, don't forget to check out the links for Sarah down below if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, and there they are. Volunteering is the most important thing, but if you can't give your time, then at least do a donation to make sure Sarah can get voter rolls and can get all those things that she needs, okay? Thank you. All right, we'll see you in the postgame for the members.